What really happens when you try to humiliate your husband in front of everyone? Can a single reckless act at a party lead to losing everything? Your marriage, your reputation, your family? The answer was delivered to me the night I got served divorce papers, and I never saw it coming. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. My name is Zina Marchenko, and I thought I was justified in everything I did. I thought Elliot deserved what he got. I was wrong about everything. The apartment felt smaller every day. Our modest two-bedroom place in Queens had once felt cozy when Elliot and I first moved in together 8 years ago. Now, with our daughter Sophia taking up the second bedroom and Elliot's accounting files scattered across our dining table most nights, it felt suffocating. "You're never really here anymore," I told Elliot one evening as he hunched over his laptop, calculator clicking rhythmically beside his coffee mug. The blue light from his screen cast shadows under his eyes, making him look older than his 36 years. "I'm sitting right here, Zina," he replied without looking up from his spreadsheet. "I've been home since 6:30. "Physically, sure, but when was the last time we actually talked? When did you last ask me about my day?" I stood in the kitchen doorway, dish towel in my hands, waiting for him to turn around. He didn't. Elliot sighed and finally looked at me. "How was your day?" "Don't patronize me." The words came out sharper than I intended. "I mean, really talk. About us. About what we want. About whether you even notice that I exist." "Of course I notice you exist. You're my wife. You're Sophia's mother." He gestured toward our daughter's bedroom, where she was supposedly doing homework, but probably reading under her covers with a flashlight. "I'm working extra hours because the Peterson account is a mess, and if I don't fix it by Friday, Mitchell might let me go. You know this." I did know this. Elliot had explained the situation at his accounting firm multiple times, but knowing didn't make the loneliness any easier. When did we become roommates who split bills instead of a married couple? Elliot closed his laptop with a soft click. "What do you want me to do, Zina? Quit my job? Let us fall behind on rent so we can have more heart-to-heart conversations? I want you to care about me the way you used to." My voice cracked slightly. "I want to feel like I matter to someone." He stood up and walked over to me, placing his hands on my shoulders. For a moment, I thought he might pull me close, might say something romantic or reassuring. Instead, he just looked tired. "You do matter. You matter to me and to Sophia, but I'm doing the best I can right now." He kissed my forehead, the kind of kiss you give a child with a scraped knee. "I need to finish this tonight." As he returned to his laptop, I felt something cold settle in my chest. When had his best stopped being enough for me? When had I started feeling invisible in my own marriage? My phone buzzed with a text message. I glanced at it quickly. A message from Bryce Holloway, a colleague from my HR coordinator job at Morrison & Associates. "Hope you're having a better evening than I am. Stuck reviewing policy manuals. Coffee tomorrow to complain about our boring lives." I looked at Elliot, already absorbed in his work again, then back at my phone. Bryce was always friendly, always asking about my day, always seeming genuinely interested in my answers. When was the last time Elliot had asked me to coffee just to spend time together? I typed back quickly, "Definitely need coffee and complaining. See you at 9. "Perfect. Looking forward to it." I deleted the message thread and slipped my phone into my pocket. As I walked past Elliot to get ready for bed, I waited for him to say something, to ask who had texted, to show any sign of curiosity about my life. He didn't look up. Later that night, as I lay in bed listening to Elliot's steady breathing beside me, I stared at the ceiling and wondered when everything had gone wrong. We used to talk for hours when we first met. He used to bring me flowers for no reason. He used to look at me like I was the most interesting person in the room. Now I felt like furniture. Necessary, functional, but ultimately forgettable. My phone buzzed again with another message from Bryce. Sweet dreams, Zina. Tomorrow's coffee is the highlight of my week. This time, I didn't delete it right away. Instead, I read it twice before turning my phone face down on the nightstand. Someone still found me interesting enough to look forward to seeing. Someone still thought spending time with me was a highlight. As I drifted off to sleep, I told myself that coffee with a colleague was harmless. Just two friends commiserating about work and life. Nothing more. But deep down, I knew I was lying to myself, and I didn't care. Morrison and Associates occupied 3 floors of a glass office building in Midtown Manhattan. My cubicle on the 15th floor had a partial view of the Hudson River if I craned my neck just right. After 5 years as an HR coordinator, I knew every policy manual, every employee handbook, and every piece of workplace gossip that circulated through our department. Bryce Holloway worked in marketing on the same floor. He was the kind of man who wore expensive cologne and always seemed to have perfect hair, even after a long day. At 33, he was confident in a way that Elliot had never been. The kind of confidence that came from never doubting that people wanted to listen to what you had to say. You look tired, he said, as we settled into a corner booth at the coffee shop across the street from our building. Rough night? Elliot was working late again. I basically talked to the back of his head for 20 minutes before giving up. I stirred my latte, watching the foam swirl. Sometimes I wonder if he'd notice if I just disappeared. Bryce leaned forward, his dark eyes focused entirely on me. His loss would be every other man's gain. I felt my cheeks warm. You're terrible. I'm honest. When was the last time he told you that you look beautiful? When did he last take you somewhere nice just because he wanted to spend time with you? The question stung because I couldn't remember the answers. Marriage isn't like dating, Bryce. It's more complicated when you have responsibilities and a child and bills. Responsibilities don't mean you stop being a woman with needs. He reached across the table and briefly touched my hand. You deserve to feel appreciated. His touch was warm and deliberate. I should have pulled my hand away immediately. Instead, I let it linger for a few seconds before slowly withdrawing. Tell me about your weekend plans, Bryce said, smoothly changing the subject. Please tell me they involve something more exciting than grocery shopping and laundry. Actually, we're going to a birthday party on Saturday. My friend Jessica is turning 35. It's at that new restaurant in Soho, Meridian. Fancy. Will Elliot actually dress up for the occasion? I laughed despite myself. If by dress up you mean wear a button-down shirt instead of a polo, then yes. A man should make an effort when he's taking a beautiful woman out. Bryce's eyes held mine. If you were my wife, I'd make sure you felt like the most gorgeous woman in the room every single day. The words sent a dangerous thrill through me. Bryce. I know. You're married. I respect that. He held up his hands in mock surrender. But I can't help speaking the truth when I see it. We talked for another 20 minutes about work projects and office politics. Bryce had a way of making even mundane topics seem interesting. He asked follow-up questions, remembered details from previous conversations, and made me laugh in ways I hadn't in months. As we walked back to the office building, he said casually, You know, I might end up at Meridian on Saturday night myself. My college roommate is having his bachelor party, and I think that's one of the places on their list. Really? What a coincidence. Isn't it? He smiled. Maybe I'll see you there. Back at my desk, I found it hard to concentrate on the employee handbook revisions I was supposed to be reviewing. Instead, I kept replaying our conversation, the way Bryce had looked at me, the compliments that felt so different from Elliot's absent-minded, you look nice comments. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister Olga. How are things with you and Elliot? Mom mentioned you seemed stressed last time she talked to you. I typed back, just the usual marriage stuff. Work stress, money concerns, feeling like we're ships passing in the night. Maybe you two need a date night. When's the last time you went out together without Sophia? Saturday, actually. Jessica's birthday party. Perfect. Dress up. Have some fun. Remember why you fell in love with each other. I stared at Olga's message for a long time before responding. Yeah, maybe that's exactly what we need. But as I said it, I wasn't thinking about reconnecting with Elliot. I was thinking about the possibility of seeing Bryce at Meridian, about the way he looked at me like I was fascinating instead of familiar. That afternoon, I found an anonymous note slipped under my keyboard when I returned from lunch. Does your husband know where you are after hours? My heart pounded as I read the words. Someone had noticed my coffee dates with Bryce. Someone was watching. I crumpled the note and threw it in the trash, but the message lingered in my mind for the rest of the day. As I rode the subway home to Queens that evening, I told myself that I wasn't doing anything wrong. Coffee with a colleague wasn't cheating. Enjoying someone's company wasn't a crime. If Elliot paid more attention to me, if he made more effort to make me feel special, I wouldn't need validation from anyone else. By the time I reached my apartment, I had convinced myself that any problems in my marriage were entirely Elliot's fault. And if I happened to run into Bryce at Jessica's party on Saturday, well, that was just a happy coincidence. I was already planning what dress to wear. Saturday evening arrived with unseasonably warm weather for October. I spent 2 hours getting ready, trying on 3 different dresses before settling on a black cocktail dress that hugged my curves in all the right places. I hadn't worn it since our anniversary dinner 2 years ago, a dinner where Elliot had spent half the time checking work emails on his phone. You look nice, Elliot said as he emerged from our bedroom, wearing khakis and a navy button-down shirt. It was the same compliment he'd given me for the past 5 years, delivered in the same distracted tone. Just nice. I turned in front of our full-length mirror, admiring how the dress made my waist look smaller. I spent 2 hours getting ready. You look beautiful, Zina. You always do. But he was already checking his phone, frowning at what appeared to be a work email. Are you going to be present tonight, or should I just bring your laptop as my date? Elliot looked up, irritation flashing across his face. The Peterson account deadline is Monday. I can't just pretend work doesn't exist because we're going to a party. One night, Elliot. I'm asking for one night where you focus on us instead of spreadsheets. Fine, you're right. He slipped his phone into his pocket. No work tonight, just us having fun with friends. But I could see his phone screen lighting up through his pocket as new messages arrived. I knew he'd be checking it the moment he thought I wasn't looking. Meridian was everything Instagram had promised. Exposed brick walls, Edison bulb chandeliers, and a cocktail menu that read like poetry. Jessica had reserved the back section of the restaurant for her party, and by the time we arrived at 7:30, the celebration was already in full swing. Zina, you look absolutely stunning. Jessica pulled me into a hug that smelled like champagne and expensive perfume. And Elliot, so glad you could make it. I know how busy work has been for you. As Jessica led us toward the bar, I scanned the room automatically. Part of me was looking for familiar faces from our friend group, but if I was being honest, I was also looking for Bryce. What can I get you to drink? The bartender asked. Vodka martini, extra dirty, I said. I rarely ordered anything stronger than wine, but tonight felt like a night for something with more edge. Beer for me, Elliot said, whatever you have on tap. As we waited for our drinks, I felt a familiar presence behind me. Well, this is a pleasant surprise. I turned to find Bryce smiling at me, looking devastatingly handsome in a charcoal grey suit that probably cost more than Elliot's monthly salary. My pulse quickened. Bryce, what are the odds? I accepted my martini from the bartender, grateful to have something to do with my hands. The bachelor party moved on to a club, but I wasn't in the mood for loud music and overpriced bottle service. His eyes swept over my dress appreciatively. I'm very glad I decided to stay. Elliot extended his hand. I'm Elliot, Zina's husband. Bryce Holloway, I work with your wife. Bryce's handshake was firm and confident. You're a lucky man. Zina is one of the most intelligent and beautiful women in our office. I felt myself blush at the compliment. When was the last time Elliot had described me as intelligent and beautiful to someone else? She is, Elliot agreed, but his tone was polite rather than proud. His phone buzzed, and I saw his hand twitch toward his pocket before he caught himself. Zina tells me you're an accountant, Bryce continued. That must be fascinating work. It pays the bills, Elliot replied with a self-deprecating smile. Not as glamorous as marketing, I'm sure. Every job has its challenges, but at least in marketing, we get to be creative. Numbers are so rigid. I caught the subtle dig and felt a flash of annoyance on Elliot's behalf, followed immediately by a thrill that Bryce was showing off for me. The martini was already making me feel bold and reckless. Elliot's work is very important, I said, but my tone lacked conviction. Even if it does consume his entire life. Elliot shot me a sharp look. Zina. What? It's true. When was the last time we had a conversation that didn't involve spreadsheets or client deadlines? Maybe we should find our table, Elliot suggested, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. Actually, I was hoping I could steal Zina for one dance, Bryce interjected smoothly. They're playing actual music instead of the usual restaurant background noise. Indeed, Jessica had hired a small jazz trio, and a few couples were swaying to a sultry version of The Way You Look Tonight in the small space that had been cleared for dancing. I don't really dance, Elliot said. All the more reason for me to step in, Bryce replied. If that's okay with you both, of course. I looked at Elliot, waiting for him to object, to claim his territory, to show some sign that he cared about another man putting his hands on his wife. Instead, he just shrugged. Go ahead. I'll find our table. As Bryce led me onto the makeshift dance floor, I felt a mixture of excitement and disappointment. Excitement because Bryce's hand was warm and strong on my lower back, because he smelled like expensive cologne and confidence. Disappointment because my husband had just handed me over to another man without a fight. He doesn't appreciate what he has, Bryce murmured in my ear as we swayed to the music. It's complicated, I replied, but I didn't pull away when he drew me slightly closer. It doesn't have to be. I looked up into his dark eyes and felt something dangerous stirring in my chest. Around us, other couples danced and laughed, but I felt like Bryce and I were in our own private bubble. The song ended and I reluctantly stepped back. I should get back to Elliot. Of course. But Zina. He caught my hand as I turned to go. You look absolutely radiant tonight. Don't let anyone make you feel like you don't deserve to shine. I carried those words back to our table, where Elliot was already checking his phone, despite his promise to leave work alone for the evening. Everything okay? I asked, as I slid into the seat beside him. Peterson's having a crisis about the quarterly projections. I might need to step outside and make a quick call. You promised, Elliot. You said no work tonight. It's just one call, 5 minutes tops. But I could see in his eyes that it wouldn't be just one call. It would be one call that led to 3 emails, that led to an hour of quick fixes that would steal him away from me for the rest of the evening. As he stepped outside, with his phone pressed to his ear, I caught sight of Bryce across the room. He was talking to Jessica, but his eyes found mine over her shoulder. He raised his glass in a small salute, and I felt that dangerous thrill again. The evening was young, and I was already making choices that would change everything. I just didn't know it yet. By 9:30, Elliot had stepped outside for quick calls 3 separate times. Each time he returned, he looked more stressed and distracted. The Peterson account crisis was apparently escalating, and I could practically see him mentally drafting emails and reviewing spreadsheets, even as he sat beside me at Jessica's birthday party. This is ridiculous, I muttered after his third disappearance, draining my second martini more quickly than I should have. Trouble in paradise. Bryce had appeared at our table while Elliot was outside. He slid into my husband's empty chair with the casual confidence of someone who knew he was wanted. He can't go one evening without work consuming his entire attention. The alcohol was making me more honest than usual. I'm sitting here in a dress I bought specifically for tonight, at a party with our friends, and I might as well be invisible. His loss is my gain. Bryce's hand found mine across the table. Dance with me again. I glanced toward the restaurant's entrance, where I could see Elliot through the glass doors, pacing as he talked animatedly into his phone. He won't even notice I'm gone. This time, when Bryce pulled me close on the dance floor, I didn't maintain any pretense of appropriate distance. I let him hold me, the way a man should hold a woman he finds irresistible. I let myself feel desired and appreciated and beautiful. "You're wasted on him," Bryce whispered against my ear, his breath warm on my neck. "Don't," I said, but I didn't pull away. "It's true. A woman like you should be worshipped, not ignored." When the song ended, we didn't immediately separate. For a moment, we stood there in the middle of the dance floor, his hand still on my waist, my palm still pressed against his chest. I could feel his heartbeat through his expensive shirt. Zina. My name sounded different when he said it, like something precious instead of an item on a to-do list. I looked up into his eyes and saw everything I'd been missing in my marriage: passion, desire, the thrill of being truly seen by someone who found me fascinating. I started to say I should go back to my table, should wait for my husband, should remember my wedding vows. Should what? Bryce's thumb traced along my jawline. Should pretend you don't feel this too? Before I could answer, Elliot reappeared at our table, looking around with mild confusion. I stepped back from Bryce quickly, my heart pounding with guilt and adrenaline. "I should go," I said. "This isn't over," Bryce replied quietly. "It can't be." I returned to the table on unsteady legs, whether from the alcohol or the emotional whiplash, I wasn't sure. "Where were you?" Elliot asked as I sat down. "Dancing. You were on the phone." My tone was sharper than necessary. "I'm sorry about that. The Peterson situation is under control now. No more interruptions, I promise." But it was too late. I was already too angry, too hurt, too reckless to accept his apology gracefully. Until the next crisis, until the next client emergency, until the next excuse to ignore your wife. "Zina, please, not here." "Why not here? At least here people might actually notice that I exist." Several of our friends at nearby tables were starting to glance in our direction. I should have lowered my voice, should have suggested we discuss this at home. Instead, the combination of alcohol and months of accumulated resentment made me want to make a scene. "You're being dramatic," Elliot said quietly, "and you've had too much to drink." "I've had exactly 2 drinks, and I'm being honest about how you treat me." "How I treat you? I work 60 hours a week to support our family. I come home every night. I help with Sophia's homework and bedtime routine. What exactly am I doing wrong?" "You're going through the motions of being a husband without actually being present." My voice was getting louder despite myself. "When was the last time you looked at me, really looked at me, like you were happy to see me?" Elliot's face flushed with embarrassment and anger. "We're not doing this here, Zina." "Why not? Maybe our friends should know what a perfect husband you are. Maybe they should know how you spent our anniversary dinner answering work emails." "That was one time, and it was an emergency." "It's always an emergency with you." I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Everything is more important than your wife. Work, clients, spreadsheets. They all get more attention and care than I do." The conversations at nearby tables had stopped entirely. Jessica was making her way over, clearly concerned about the disturbance at her birthday party. "Zina, honey, maybe you should sit down," Jessica suggested gently. But I was beyond reason now. The martinis, the dancing with Bryce, the months of feeling invisible in my own marriage, it all coalesced into a moment of pure, destructive impulse. I picked up my fresh cocktail from the table, a cosmopolitan this time, pink and pretty and perfectly symbolic of the feminine attention I felt I'd been denied. "You want to know what I think of your priorities, Elliot?" And before he could answer, before I could think about consequences or dignity, or the fact that we were surrounded by friends with phones and cameras, I poured the entire drink over his head. The pink liquid dripped down his face and soaked into his navy shirt. Ice cubes scattered across the floor. The restaurant went completely silent except for the soft jazz trio, who seemed oblivious to the drama unfolding in front of them. Elliot sat there for a moment, cosmopolitan, dripping from his hair, his face a mask of shock and humiliation. Around us, I could hear the soft clicks of phone cameras, the whispered exclamations of our friends. Then he stood up slowly, wiped his face with his napkin, and looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not anger, not hurt, but something much worse. Disgust. "We're leaving," he said quietly. "Elliot, The reality of what I'd just done hit me like a physical blow. The alcohol-fueled rage evaporated, leaving behind only the horrifying awareness that I'd just publicly humiliated my husband in front of our entire social circle. But it was too late. Elliot was already walking toward the exit, his shoulders rigid with wounded dignity. Jessica was staring at me with a mixture of shock and disappointment. Our friends were whispering among themselves, and I could see the glow of phone screens as people shared photos and videos of my spectacular meltdown. I looked around desperately for Bryce, hoping for some sign of support or understanding, but he had disappeared, probably not wanting to be associated with the mess I'd just created. I grabbed my purse and followed Elliot outside, my heels clicking frantically on the sidewalk as I tried to catch up with him. "Elliot, wait. I'm sorry, I didn't mean—" He turned around, and the look on his face stopped me cold. "Don't," he said. "Just don't." We rode home in complete silence, the smell of cosmopolitan still clinging to his clothes. When we reached our apartment, Elliot went straight to our bedroom and closed the door. I stood in our living room, still wearing my black cocktail dress, and realized that I might have just destroyed my marriage for the sake of a moment's satisfaction. But even then, I wasn't ready to admit that I was entirely wrong. Even then, I was already crafting the story I would tell myself and others, about how Elliot had driven me to it, about how I was the victim of his neglect. I had no idea that Elliot was in our bedroom, quietly packing a bag for himself and Sophia. I had no idea that this was the last night I would spend in my marriage as I knew it. I woke up Sunday morning with a pounding headache and the slowly dawning realization that something was very wrong. The apartment was too quiet. Elliot's side of the bed was empty, but that wasn't unusual. He often got up early on weekends to catch up on work. But when I stumbled to the kitchen for coffee, I found a note on the counter in Elliot's careful handwriting. "Sophia and I are staying at my parents' house for a few days. We need some space to think about what happened last night. Please don't call or come over. I'll be in touch when I'm ready to talk." My hands shook as I read the note twice, 3 times. He had taken our daughter and left me. The reality of the situation hit me like a physical blow. I immediately called his phone, but it went straight to voicemail. I tried texting. "Elliot, please come home. We need to talk about this. I'm sorry about last night." No response. I called his parents' house, but his mother, Irina, answered with ice in her voice. "He doesn't want to speak with you right now, Zina. I think you've done enough damage." "Irina, please. It was just a fight. Married couples fight. Married couples don't humiliate each other in public. Those photos are already all over social media. My son looks like a fool, and you made him look that way in front of everyone he knows." The line went dead. Photos, social media. My stomach dropped as I realized the full scope of what I'd done. I opened Instagram with trembling fingers and searched for Jessica's birthday party hashtag. There I was in living color, my face twisted with anger as I dumped a bright pink cocktail over my husband's head. The image had been shared dozens of times already, with captions ranging from "relationship goals not" to "when your husband ignores you all night." But it was the comments that really made me sick. "Poor guy, he looks so humiliated. What kind of wife does this in public? She's clearly drunk and out of control. I'd divorce her so fast her head would spin. I threw my phone across the room, watching it skitter under the couch. This couldn't be happening. It was just a moment of anger, just one mistake. Surely Elliot would calm down and come home, and we could work through this like adults. The apartment felt enormous and empty without Sophia's chatter and Elliot's quiet presence. I spent the day alternating between rage and panic, crafting text messages I didn't send and imagining conversations where I could explain myself. By evening, I couldn't stand the silence anymore. I called my sister Olga. "Oh, honey," she said when she heard my voice. "I saw the video. Are you okay?" "Video? There's a video. Someone posted it on TikTok. It's been shared about 1,000 times." Olga's voice was gentle but worried. "Zina, what were you thinking?" "I wasn't thinking. I was angry and drunk and tired of being ignored." The words tumbled out of me in a rush. "He spent the entire evening on work calls, Olga. I was sitting there in a new dress, trying to have a nice time at our friend's party, and he couldn't be bothered to pay attention to me for 5 minutes. So you threw a drink at him. It wasn't planned. It just happened. And now he's taken Sophia and moved in with his parents like I'm some kind of dangerous criminal." There was a long pause. "Maybe you should give him some time to cool off. Men's egos are fragile, especially when they're embarrassed in public." "How long is some time? It's been almost 24 hours and he won't even take my calls." "I don't know, honey, but maybe you should think about whether there are things you need to apologize for beyond just the drink." "What do you mean?" Another pause. "Mom mentioned that you've been spending a lot of time complaining about Elliot lately, and there are rumors at your office about you and that marketing guy." My blood ran cold. "What rumors?" "People are saying you've been having coffee dates, that you dance a little too close at office parties. Zina, please tell me you're not having an affair." "I'm not having an affair." The words were technically true, but they felt hollow even as I said them. "Bryce is just a friend, a colleague. A colleague you have intimate coffee dates with while your husband is working to support your family." The judgment in Olga's voice stung. "You don't understand what it's like, Olga. You're single. You don't know what it's like to feel invisible in your own marriage." "You're right, I don't understand. But I understand that marriage is work, and it sounds like you've been putting your energy into the wrong relationship." After I hung up, I sat in my empty apartment and tried to figure out how everything had gone so wrong so quickly. This time yesterday, I was getting ready for a party, excited about the possibility of seeing Bryce and feeling attractive and desired. Now I was alone, my marriage was in shambles, and my daughter was asking her grandparents why Mommy and Daddy were fighting. I retrieved my phone from under the couch and scrolled through my contacts until I found Bryce's number. Maybe he would understand. Maybe he would remind me that I deserve better than Elliot's neglect. But when I called, it went straight to voicemail. I tried again an hour later with the same result. Finally, I sent a text. "Last night was a disaster. I could really use a friend right now." The response came back quickly. "I think it's best if we keep things professional from now on. Hope you and your husband work things out." I stared at the message in disbelief. When I was married and safely unavailable, Bryce had been full of compliments and suggestions that I deserved better. Now that my marriage was actually in crisis, he was nowhere to be found. Monday morning arrived grey and drizzling, matching my mood perfectly. I dragged myself to work, hoping that routine and distraction might help me figure out how to fix the mess I'd created. But the office felt different. Conversation stopped when I walked by. People who usually smiled and said good morning suddenly found their computer screens fascinating. Even the receptionist, who normally chatted with everyone, just nodded politely when I passed her desk. At lunch, I overheard 2 colleagues talking by the coffee machine. "Did you see that video of Zina throwing a drink at her husband?" "Oh my God, yes. So embarrassing. Poor guy." "I heard she's been flirting with Bryce from marketing. Maybe the husband found out." "Really? That would explain a lot. She's been acting weird lately." I cleared my throat loudly, and both women turned around with guilty expressions. "Ladies," I said coolly, pouring myself coffee with hands that only shook slightly. They mumbled hellos and quickly left the break room. By Tuesday, I still hadn't heard from Elliot. I was starting to panic in earnest. I drove to his parents' house after work, but no one answered the door, even though I could see lights on inside and heard Sophia's voice. I called through the mail slot. "I know you're in there. I just want to talk to my husband and see my daughter." Finally, Elliot's father, Vadim, opened the door, but he didn't invite me in. "Zina, you need to go home." "I want to see Sophia. She's my daughter." "Sophia's fine. She's doing homework with her grandmother." "This is ridiculous, Vadim. It was one fight, one stupid mistake." His expression was stern but not unkind. "It wasn't just one fight, and you know it. Elliot has been unhappy for months. He's been trying to save your marriage while you've been distracted." "Distracted?" "He knows about your friend from work, Zina. He's known for weeks." The words hit me like a slap. "There's nothing to know. Bryce and I are just friends." Friends don't send each other good morning texts every day. Friends don't have secret coffee dates. Friends don't dance the way you two were dancing on Saturday night. I opened my mouth to argue, but Vadim held up his hand. "Elliot has been patient. He's been hoping you would end whatever this is, and remember your commitments. But Saturday night, when you humiliated him in front of everyone you know, that was the last straw. So what happens now?" Vadim's expression softened slightly. "That's up to you and Elliot. But Zina, if you want to save your marriage, you need to be honest about what you've done wrong. All of it." As I drove home through the darkening streets of Queens, I tried to process what Vadim had told me. Elliot knew about Bryce. He'd known for weeks and hadn't said anything, hadn't confronted me, hadn't demanded I stop. Maybe he'd been hoping I would come to my senses on my own. Maybe Saturday night wasn't just about work stress and martinis. Maybe it was the culmination of months of betrayal and disrespect that I'd been too selfish to acknowledge. For the first time since this whole mess started, I began to wonder if I was the villain in this story after all. Thursday morning, I was sitting in my cubicle trying to focus on employee handbook revisions when my personal email chimed with a message that made my blood freeze. RE, Notice of Separation and Custody Filing. Please review the attached documents and contact our office to arrange service. Mitchell, Stevens and Associates, Attorneys at Law. My hands trembled as I opened the attachment. 23 pages of legal documents that spelled out the end of my marriage in cold, clinical language. Elliot was filing for legal separation with intent to divorce. He was seeking primary custody of Sophia, citing unstable behavior and infidelity on my part. The evidence section made me sick to my stomach. Screenshots of text messages between Bryce and me dating back 3 months. Credit card records showing unexplained charges at restaurants and coffee shops. Witness statements from the party on Saturday night. Social media posts and videos of my public display of aggressive behavior. How had he gotten my text messages? When had he been documenting my movements? The man I'd been married to for 8 years, the man I thought was oblivious to everything except spreadsheets, had been quietly building a case against me. I called Elliot immediately, but his phone went straight to voicemail. I tried his work number. "Peterson and Associates, this is Elliot." "Elliot, we need to talk. I got the papers from your lawyer." There was a long pause. "I'm at work, Zina." "I don't care. This is insane. You can't take Sophia away from me over one stupid fight." "It's not about one fight, and you know it." His voice was calm, professional, like he was discussing a client's tax returns. "I tried to save our marriage. I gave you months to end your relationship with Bryce and recommit to our family. Instead, you escalated." "What relationship? We had coffee a few times." "You had coffee 17 times in 2 months. You texted him good morning before you said good morning to me. You bought new clothes and lingerie that you never wore for me. You started working late on days when he worked late. Should I continue? Each accusation hit like a physical blow, because they were all true. I had done all of those things, but hearing them listed out like evidence in a court case made them sound so much worse than they'd felt at the time. I never slept with him, I said weakly. Emotional infidelity is still infidelity, Zina. And frankly, after Saturday night, I don't think it matters anymore. What do you mean? I mean that you chose to humiliate me in public rather than address the problems in our marriage like an adult. You chose to make me look like a fool in front of our friends, our daughter's friends' parents, and half of social media. That's not something I can forgive or forget. People make mistakes, Elliot. People have fights. That doesn't mean you throw away 8 years of marriage. You threw away our marriage the day you decided another man was more interesting than your husband. Saturday night was just the public announcement. I was crying now, ugly sobs that made it hard to speak. Please don't do this. Please don't take Sophia. She needs her mother. Sophia needs stability. She needs to be around adults who can control their emotions and make responsible choices. Right now, that's not you. I can change. I can be better. I'll stop talking to Bryce. I'll go to counseling. I'll do whatever you want. It's too late for that. His voice was still calm, but I could hear the finality in it. I spent months hoping you would make those choices on your own. Instead, you got worse. More secretive, more resentful, more willing to blame me for your own unhappiness. So that's it? You're just going to destroy our family? I'm not destroying our family, Zina. I'm protecting what's left of it. The line went dead. I sat in my cubicle, staring at the legal documents through my tears, and realized that I had no idea how to fight this. I had no money for a lawyer that could match Elliot's firm. I had no evidence of wrongdoing on his part because there wasn't any. I had no character witnesses because I'd alienated most of our mutual friends. All I had were excuses and justifications that sounded hollow even to me. That evening, I drove to my mother's house in Brooklyn, hoping for sympathy and support. Anya Petrov had never particularly liked Elliot, always thought I'd married beneath me, always encouraged me to demand more from life. He's trying to steal Sophia from me, I told her, spreading the legal documents across her kitchen table. He's claiming I'm an unfit mother because I had an argument with him at a party. Mom read through the papers with growing concern. Zina, these text messages, did you really send all of these to another man? They're just friendly messages between colleagues. I wish I could wake up to your voice every morning is not a colleague message, Zina. This is evidence of an affair. I never slept with him. That's not the point. Mom's voice was sharper than I'd expected. You're a married woman with a child. You have responsibilities. So I'm supposed to be miserable forever because I made a commitment when I was 26. You're supposed to honor your commitments or end them honorably. You don't get to have both a husband and a boyfriend, Zina. That's not how marriage works. I stared at her in shock. I thought you'd be on my side. I'm always on your side, but I can't support choices that hurt my granddaughter. Mum folded the papers and handed them back to me. Sophia needs stability. If you can't provide that, maybe she's better off with Elliot for now. I left my mother's house feeling more alone than I'd ever felt in my life. Even my own family was turning against me. Friday afternoon, I was called into my supervisor's office at work. Zina, we need to discuss your recent behavior, Mr. Henderson said, gesturing for me to sit down. There have been complaints about your relationship with Bryce Holloway, and the incident at the restaurant last weekend has created some concerns about your professional judgment. My personal life has nothing to do with my work performance. When your personal life becomes public entertainment on social media, it reflects on the company. When you're having an inappropriate relationship with a colleague, it creates a hostile work environment. When you're making scenes in public that our clients and partners can see online, it becomes a professional issue. My heart sank. Are you firing me? We're placing you on unpaid administrative leave while we conduct a full investigation. HR will be in touch about next steps. I cleaned out my desk in a daze, avoiding eye contact with colleagues who pretended to be busy with their work. Bryce was nowhere to be seen, probably hiding in his office to avoid any association with the mess I'd become. As I carried my box of personal items to the elevator, I caught sight of my reflection in the polished metal doors. I looked like exactly what I was, a woman who had destroyed her own life through a series of selfish, short-sighted choices. That night, I sat in my empty apartment with a bottle of wine and tried to figure out how everything had gone so wrong so quickly. A week ago, I'd been a wife and mother, with a stable job and a social circle. Now I was facing divorce, unemployment, and the loss of my daughter. All because I'd wanted to feel special. All because I'd convinced myself that I deserved better than the life I had. All because I'd poured a cocktail over my husband's head instead of dealing with my problems like an adult. As I drained my third glass of wine, I realized that Elliot had been right about everything. I had chosen another man over my marriage. I had prioritized my own desires over my family's stability. I had humiliated him publicly and then tried to blame him for my own choices. But even then, even in my lowest moment, I wasn't ready to take full responsibility. Even then, I was already crafting the story I would tell myself tomorrow, about how Elliot was vindictive, about how the system was stacked against women, about how I was the real victim in all of this. It would be months before I understood that the only person who had destroyed my life was me. But by then, it would be far too late to matter. The divorce papers arrived on Monday morning, hand-delivered by a process server who didn't care that I answered the door in my bathrobe with mascara streaked down my cheeks. Elliot had moved fast and efficiently, like he approached everything in his life. The man I'd thought was passive and inattentive had orchestrated my downfall with the same methodical precision he brought to his accounting work. And as I stood in my doorway, holding the papers that would legally end my marriage, I finally understood that I had never really known my husband at all. I had underestimated him completely, and now I was going to pay the price for every choice I'd made, every boundary I'd crossed, every moment I'd chosen my own desires over my family's well-being. The reckoning had arrived, and I was facing it alone.